our motto is no surprises. If we don't communicate all those, then it's kind of our bad. And at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is sit down and say, we made a communication error and we didn't give you, a heads up on the fact that we made a change and it's going to cost you $1.5 million. Our take is, we over communicate and we're proud that we do.
Steve, welcome to the show.
This is great. I'm glad to be at the Fort Company's office.
I appreciate it. For those listening, Steve and I have been good friends for a long time, and you've
TCU. Before you jump in, I agreed to do this because I admire Chris an enormous amount, and that when he was in college, his work ethic was like over the top, and he built a lot of student housing projects. And my son Pete, who's equally as impressive as Chris, he introduced me to Chris because they were in the same fraternity, and I love TCU. But over the time, Chris actually was conducting probably as much business as he was learning at TCU. And I invested in some student housing projects, which turned to be really great projects. And they all had a story, and it was fun to listen to Chris because I'd been in the business for, 30 years. And Chris was, new, but you could tell he was going to get it quickly. And so here we are. This is like the old mentor has come back to see how well the young guy's done, and he's doing great.
I appreciate it, Steve. I was going to say, it was in my notes. You've kind of gotten to watch the whole thing unfold, and I appreciate you supporting me when I was young. Your vote of confidence helped me a ton, just personally, and then with other people. If I told them Steve was interested, it made it easier on other folks.
Well, that's a compliment, but you already had a following, and what was, I think, special is the amount of migration and growth of not only, Fort Worth, Tarrant County, Dallas County, but the enrollment at TCU has been so incredible.
It's insane.
And you look at all of the student housing, explosions at all the universities around Texas. It's a business model that, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's how I got introduced to Chris. And now he's got a successful company, and he's doing a lot of industrial work and other type work. And I would say, Pete, along with Paul and Hunter, they, learned a lot of things from you, and they're doing an incredible job today too. They're a little different, but
I love those guys.
Well, I do too. They're all doing a super job, and it's fun investing with guys like you and Pete because you're very sensitive about making certain that what you say is delivered. Because if you say it's going to be delivered, and then after a year or two it's not, then you just have to go through the kind of negative issues to get it back to a positive issue.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I'm glad to be here, and I thank you a lot.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the Van Amburghs, Pete, Kate, the whole clan, and it's been a true pleasure. And Molly now.
And you've got a 2, a 4, and a 6, and they have a 5 and a 3. So if you go down the numbers, you're going to crisscross with them.
Yeah.
They're at Country Day, but who knows? They may all be going to the same school here before long.
Yeah, they'll probably run around together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we talked a little bit about the early part of my career, but I thought maybe a good place to start was how you got into the real estate industry and when you knew real estate was going to be your thing.
Well, I went to Washington and Lee, and I got a business degree, and it was pretty general. But when I came home, back when I was growing up, and, most of us kind of in my era, when you had a summer, you might go to summer camp for a week or 2 weeks, but what was more important from a work ethic standpoint was working some type of a summer job. So From the time I was 16 to the time I graduated from college, I worked every summer. It wasn't optional. You made money to help pay for your expenses for school. Tuition was not that much, but what ended up happening was I really didn't look around. I was more focused on making dollars doing asphalt paving or concrete paving or working for a construction equipment company and doing service work. And I think really what happened was I was really comfortable in those fields. It was not real estate. It was not really finance, but I gravitated when I graduated to jump right back into the construction equipment business. I stayed there for a while, but then I went to work for Las Colinas, and I went to work for Las Colinas to operate some of their smaller non-core businesses. And I worked for John Carpenter and Ben Carpenter. I loved it. It was a really interesting culture. Being involved with Las Colinas was, something that you really, just couldn't believe you were part of. But
and what did Las Colinas at that time, just like quick, what did it look like then? Everybody knows what it's like now, but what shape was it in when you got there?
There were probably 3 or 4 buildings around the entire Lake Carolyn, and most of it was ranch land. There was a limited amount of residential, a little bit of an industrial park, one tech park. But I would say, if the taxable value was $2 billion today, it's probably $30 billion.
Yeah.
And, we currently have a 1 million square foot office campus for Wells Fargo underway on Lake Carolyn, and it's breathtaking. So when you go out there, you're really proud. But, during the time that I started and to today, there have been legitimately 5 down cycles, and that Las Colinas withstood the first 3 or 4, but then between the third and the fourth, things slowed down. Their debt loads were what they were, and the company went into kind of a recapitalization. And that's when I left and I joined the coal company, which was KOLL, and loved everybody there. Great company, big California presence. And after 12 years, Don Cole wanted to retire and sell the company, and I was lucky enough where he selected me. And then I built a team of other people, and then we sort of conveyed some of the ownership to those other guys, and that's how I got in it. And I got in it from a leasing standpoint, and what I quickly learned, and here's a quick story, is when all the partners on an office project or industrial project are sitting around the table talking about the importance of different elements of the overall project, leasing is obviously very important. But what's really important is the financial underwriting, the equity raising to get the project going, the return on cost, what the market's really doing. And I quickly learned that unless I wasn't really smart and, sort of wise to how you really underwrite a project, you really would never be able to be the owner that I always wanted to be. So I jumped from the leasing side in Las Colinas to the development side, which was primarily project management, overseeing the construction management. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. And I've sat around tables before, and now it's funny when you really understand all the components of the project. You're sort of like that guy that is at the circus, and he has 5 sticks and he's spinning the plates on top of those 5 sticks, and he has to keep them all going.
Yeah.
And I would say my role is probably to at least understand what's going on in each one of those plates, but letting others spin them,
Yep.
and then letting me make certain that I support them and help them, to make certain they're successful. So,
and if you had to say a developer does all these things, like those plates would be architecture and design, working with construction, working with the city, working with the tenant.
Yeah. Well, the 5 would be asset management, which would be asset management, property management, financial management.
Yep.
Okay. It's important, but it kind of comes after the project. So It's one of the plates, though. The first would be marketing, leasing, branding, relationships with tenants, relationships with tenant rep brokers, making the project happen. The next would be what I would call financial management, which is raising the equity, making certain that the bank loan is good, really being sensitive to guarantees and recourse. So that's the financial aspects. The next would be what I would call relationship management and tenant management. And that takes somebody special from the standpoint that if you sell something and there's an issue, that company is going to come back to you first because you're the relationship manager. I like to think that I've been in that a lot, but now we have 3 or 4 other people that are doing an incredible job. So they'll step up and do a lot of that. And then the last would be construction management and making certain that we manage the contractor correctly. So those 5 all work together.
Yep.
There is no I in team. So, the team is all holding hands, and you probably read that on some of the little things. I got
them on one of your cards right here.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. One of the things is when we build a building and we sell it, everybody that's an owner, is compensated, and hopefully it's a good return on our equity. But it's also important for us, probably no different than Fort, that you share with everybody in the company some portion of a fee or a bonus, whatever the percentage is, 10%, 8%, whatever it is. It's really important because it's really important to me anyway, where if I receive $1, I want to make certain that somebody else that's in accounting or in property management, that they get something as well, because nothing's worse than some, greedy manager owner where he's not sharing with everybody that's actually doing the work to make it.
Right. Okay. I want to go back to 2001. So David Cole comes in and says, I'm going to retire.
Yeah. It was right after 9/11, and Don Cole came in. Okay.
Cole.
Yeah, Don. And I looked up to him just like I did Bob Mullins. That was probably my biggest criteria, was really understanding who the owner was and the kind of man he was. Don was a really wonderful guy. He went to Stanford, really bright, was on the bank board of Wells Fargo corporate. So he was a really super guy. And his wife had passed away, and he just didn't have the drive that he wanted. And he also was the founder and creator and developer of 2 or 3 very large developments in Cabo San Lucas.
Okay.
So if anybody's been to Palmilla, or Cabo del Sol, or there's just a lot of developments down there that he did, pretty much all of them. And when his wife passed away, he was spending more time down there. And after a couple of years, he met another lady. He got married, and they decided it was more fun to spend time there. So he selected me because we did have one lender at the platform level, and they were out of New York, and they liked the build-to-suit model.
Yep.
And so we focused on build-to-suits. The financing was provided by Don and by the New York partner. And we quickly went from moving the headquarters from Newport Beach, California to Dallas. We also went from having a corporate headquarters with roughly 50 people in Newport Beach to having 20 here. We sold most of the California assets because it was really difficult for us to understand that market when we really needed to focus on more of a corporate build-to-suit market. There's a man who's got an incredible kind of consulting practice named Chris Lee, not Chris Powers, but Chris Lee, and Lee and Associates. We hired him, and he came in and looked at our company because we wanted in 2003 or 4 to really make certain we were going to be a great company. And he studied us, and he went to our office in Charlotte and Atlanta and came back, and he said, the margins that you guys make and the activity and the pipeline you have for corporate office build-to-suit projects is probably better than any other group I'd seen. And you all have really good relationship skills, and it's really important for you to be client-centric. And instead of having geographic areas of responsibility or pursuit, why don't you do a job with 3 or 4 incredible marketing type people, sales type people, and call on all these corporate groups that need facilities and be their facility provider wherever they want to go. So if you look at our website, I think we built 150 projects, and that's about 12 or 13 billion.
Dang.
And that a lot of times you get to go places that you never really thought you would go, such as south of the river in Chicago, or with Des Moines, West Des Moines. We've been to places pretty much everywhere, with the exception of California. We've never gone back to California. The risk of entitlements and permitting is it's too much risk.
Yeah.
You can't control the land, and you don't know if it's permitted and ready for development. And the amount of money you spend is, from a risk standpoint, it just doesn't work for us. So.
Yeah. So in 2001, you already knew you were going to go the corporate development route.
Yes.
Or corporate,
build-to-suit kind of route.
Corporate build-to-suit. And he said, okay, I want you to take over the company. And at that point, you bought it from him. Or
that's right.
Okay, a transaction took place.
And he provided the financing, and we paid him off in 3 years.
Okay.
And then the other partner, it took until 2008.
Okay.
And we'd agreed to a price and how the valuation would work. And we had a portfolio of roughly 3 to 4 million square feet of buildings, and we ended up selling about 750,000 square feet of buildings to pay them off.
Got it.
So when we started in business, we had a adequate balance sheet, but not enough. And then we had 100% leased buildings, and we wanted to grow. So at that time, in 2009, we decided it was best to sell 50% of the company, and we would then keep that capital in the company. And, give or take $100 million is what we were able to raise through that one sale. And it was the 50% went to a family office. It went to an insurance company. It went to some individuals. They sat on our board. We as a group had 50% of the board, and then the new outside group came in, and the experience with them was incredibly good. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned so much from a guy named Mort Meyerson, which is the Symphony Center in Dallas. He was Ross Perot's partner. Mort is very, very smart, but he's also kind of inspirational from the standpoint that he really likes being on a winning team. And so from the time that he started, because our capital structure was good, it gave us the ability to sit down with JLL, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, and their tenants and tell them that we had no financing contingencies. We would give them a bank letter. We had the equity in hand, and we even shared on a confidential basis our audited financials. And so as a result, in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like the first 5 or 6 years, we were doing 1 million square feet of office build-to-suits per year. And that when you take that, the costs back then were probably $300 a foot. So, we were doing, I don't know, $600 to $1 billion a year. And that what distinguished ourselves from others is that we wanted to be 100% focused. We didn't really feel like it was in our best interest to be doing too many things. We didn't do any retail. We didn't do any multifamily. And we refer to that as rainbow chasing. We thought if we had a real core competency in office and corporate and industrial buildings that maybe have manufacturing and office on the front end. So all the people that we built our team around are very proficient in corporate office, corporate manufacturing, assembly, tilt wall, and it showed. And that because of that, we wanted to make certain that we were humble. We absolutely hate kind of arrogance in the workplace. And Lord knows that, prospective tenants can't stand people that have arrogance. But as a result of all that, we grew our footprint. And then all of a sudden, we got a lot of repeat business from the JP Morgans, the FedExes, and we would build buildings for them in places like Colorado Springs, or we're currently building a building in Ruston, Louisiana for JP Morgan Chase.
Okay. So on the word focus, did you think about we need to focus because you weren't focused? How did you get to that? Because I think I've done a lot of these. It's the one thing that's easy to say, focus, and the more successful you get, it's harder to do because you feel like if we're good here, we can be good everywhere.
I think we have always been kind of lean, but we've also project managed and construction managed projects. Instead of putting one person on it, we generally have 2 or 3.
Yep.
And we feel like that's good insurance, and it's good we're managing our risk a lot better when it comes to cost overruns and schedule.
Yeah.
So, we never, it's kind of like, we don't understand the multifamily business, and that we do understand the industrial and the office business. So, that's our focus. And if anything else comes through the door, what we generally would do is say we can make that a component of a project that we have, where if it's a retail center and it's a Tom Thumb or an HEB or whatever it might be, we can make it part of our development, and maybe we'll provide some of the equity, but we really don't understand that, and we certainly don't have the relationship.
Yep. But you guys decided we're going to focus on this, and you've done it now for 20 something years.
Yeah. Since, it's been 24 years this year.
And if you just had to say like how great of a decision that was for you over all these years, for somebody listening that's trying to do lots of things at once, like how critical would you say that was?
I would say it's the most critical decision that we made, and that we only, for example, if you walk in the door at a top company and they have office requirements, maybe they have some distribution center requirements, maybe they have some data center requirements.
Yeah.
It seemed like if we stayed in that sort of circle, that they respected us more, and they really felt like we were building a team of super experienced people in the data center space, office space, corporate type space. We have a senior VP, and she's an incredible lady, and she's kind of our workplace champion. So and Deb's working on Wells Fargo right now, but she's somebody that if somebody at Bank of America, for example, needed some assistance in kind of really thinking through the workplace strategy, she's over the top. So that's sort of what I would call a little bit of, extra benefit. By being focused, we can make people really feel comfortable that we're going to deliver the best product for them.
I love it. All right. I want to spend some time on you build these mega corporate campuses. You've done 150 of them, DFW, and I know you're all over the country, but DFW is probably the most prolific Fortune 500 headquarter folks moving here. So I thought we would just spend some time. How does a mega deal like this get done? So maybe we could spend 20, 30 minutes from like the day that you hear that XYZ company might be looking to the day they're open. I thought I'd go through a series of questions to kind of get us there.
Yeah. Maybe the one, and I can do this quickly. The largest project that we've done in the Dallas-Fort Worth area was City Line.
Okay.
And it was 200 acres.
You bought that deal in Richardson, right?
Right. And that when we met with State Farm, they did not disclose who they were.
Okay. So wait, how does that happen?
Well, they had no name tags, and they were being represented by Randy and Craig at Stream, but at that time they were with the group before. I'm just trying to think of the name.
CBRE or?
No, it was a group that was another brokerage firm. I'll think of it in a second. But
and you're literally like in a boardroom, and they walk these people in, and they say you can have the conversation, but you're not going to know who they're with.
It was even different than that. They asked Toby Grove and myself to meet them for 1 hour at the Capitol Grill in Legacy to talk about a large project, and they were going to consolidate and add a lot of people, and they wouldn't say who it was. Our first guess was they appeared to be more Midwestern. They were incredibly nice people, and so we thought it was Caterpillar, and it wasn't. But we got up in front of them and sort of went through the process, how we're aligned together, how there would be no conflicts of interest, how we would not self-perform any of the work. And we really wanted to be totally aligned where we could really work as partners. They wanted to lease the property. They also wanted to invest some equity in the project. So then we were thinking maybe it was an insurance company or an investment company, and that they did not disclose who they were. They told us that the meeting went really well and they had more questions, and that we gave them our cards, and they said they would get back to us within 24 hours. They needed some temporary space, so they ended up going in a caravan. There were like 20 people, and they went to Richardson to look at some Nortel Networks vacated space, about 500,000 square feet. We said we developed all those buildings. We did all of those on a build-to-suit basis. They're really good buildings. And we also have a site that we have an option on that is next door to those buildings, if you're interested, and that the DART stop, or the DART rail, the light rail, is going to stop at our site. And they actually drove immediately to that site to see if it would work. And within 2 weeks, we had given them a proposal. They identified who they were, and that we gave them a proposal. We then met with them, and it was more of a low-rise campus development with surface parking. And they really felt like they needed to have more density, and they needed to have more mid-rise and even a high-rise building, and structured parking, because they didn't want their employees to have to park in a surface lot and come out to a car that's 100 degrees.
Yep.
And from a security standpoint, they wanted the female employees to have the ability to park in a garage and have a little more secure way to get in the building. So we ended up designing what's there today. It's a 12, a 15, a 23, and a 15-story building. It totals 2 million square feet.
Damn.
And that all the leases that they signed, they were a part owner of the project. by virtue of investing equity. But from the day that we met them at the Capitol Grill in Legacy until the day we actually had our ribbon cutting and the president, CEO of State Farm, everybody came in, was 9 months. So that's from design, bidding, financing, because it was 100% leased and State Farm was such an incredible, credit. I think AA at that time. And because they were in the business, it was really a great partnership. So we did the first 1.5 million, and before we even topped out on the third building, we started the fourth.
Yeah.
So that was 2 million feet. And at the same time, everything we did was transparent. We didn't do any of the general construction. Austin did a very nice job. Constructors or Structure Tone did a nice job on some of the improvements interior. But that lease enabled us to do a 25-acre retail development with a Whole Foods, and we teamed up with Regency Centers, which is a retail REIT, because just like what we talked about, that was not our, sort of expertise, and that it's walkable, so State Farm could walk to all those places. And then we teamed up with 3 different multifamily developers. Crow Holdings was involved as an equity partner in a couple of them. But JLB, the Zale Corson, there are a couple others. We built 3,500 multifamily units. Then we built a building that was 500,000 feet for Raytheon. And what happens is when you really get somebody that's got the quality of a State Farm, retail groups want to come. So we reserved a lot of the ground floor space of those buildings and ground floor space of the garages, because they're all podium parked where the buildings sit on top.
Right.
We have roughly 70,000 square feet of retail and restaurants. And it's been effective. It's really been good. However, it took a setback with the pandemic and COVID, because State Farm probably had 20 to 30% in those buildings for 24 to 30 months. And it's really hard to sustain a retail restaurant when the people that are coming every day for breakfast and lunch and dinner are not there.
Yeah.
So,
okay, real quick, going back to that, what would a typical team look like on behalf of the client, especially for a group as large as State Farm? Like, how big is the team that's making the decision, one, to say, yes, this is what we want to do, but then making decisions on what you're actually going to build? Is that tens of people? Is that 2 people? Is that?
I'll tell you exactly what was in that room, because there were 3 core groups in that room. So when you looked at State Farm, they are no different than other companies that we build for. The decision group it's kind of like a 3 or 4-legged stool. Okay. So number 1 is finance.
So CFO.
The CFO or the director of finance. Number 2 would be HR, because they really want the HR group and the people to be the driver of the development and where it's located. Number 3 would be real estate, construction, design, and that's probably 1 or 2 seats. So there's usually a workplace person that says, this is what we want the workplace to look like.
Yep.
And in the case of State Farm, if our floor plates were 40,000 square feet, if you divide that into 2 million square feet, that's 50 floors. 50 floors is a lot of floors that are 40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And if you look at, a 1 million square foot tower, most of those floors, if it's a tower, are 25,000 square feet. So you can back into that. That's that would have been a 40 or 50 story building had we put it into one.
Yeah.
But they're all interconnected. They have training. They have a lot of people in Bloomington, Illinois, which is where State Farm is located. They are the best training people for all of their kind of up and rising, teammates. So a lot of the people, they do it virtually. So we had 100,000 square feet out of the 2 million square feet that was training space, and the audio visual and, all the broadcast stuff. It was all there. And they essentially would broadcast that in Bloomington, in a room with 50 people from State Farm in Dallas would get their certification for some type of insurance underwriting. So
do they, and obviously State Farm's super sophisticated, big company, do they generally already know all their wants and needs, or are you kind of coaching them in those early months of helping them understand what they actually need?
I think what happens is when everybody sits, we have kind of a planning and visioning session. And because of the experience that we've had with other large companies, we're all really collaborative and sharing. There's not an opinion. It's all just factual, and this is what this group's doing. The architect is involved. The interior architect's involved. We're talking about ceiling heights and base spacings and densities and parking requirements, and that we didn't know the exact impact that having a dart stop on our site was. It was 50 yards from the State Farm entrance, and it ended up that State Farm felt like the parking needed to be somewhere between 4.5 and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And that we ended up building 4.7 spaces. So 4.7 times 2 million, that's just under 10,000 spaces.
Damn.
Okay. The top floor of all those garages has rarely been parked on, which means that they've had more shared ride, park and ride, or people that come. So what was kind of interesting was on occasion, we would take the dart rail from our home north 20 minutes to City Line and get off, and that it was literally a 20-minute drive, hassle-free, read the paper, and that about 15 to 20% of all the State Farm employees figured out that was a much better way to get to work every day. So it was funny because we went up and we hosted a party for the top 25 brokers in town just to see the buildings and see the product. And we hosted the dinner on the top of the 23-story building. And we took Dart up and took Dart back. And that when we were getting on Dart at like 10 o'clock at night to go back home, there were probably 30 or 40 State Farm people that were getting on the train to go back to their home too, and getting off along the way or wherever it might be. And, I took the opportunity to just ask all of them if they were happy. And they said they were beyond happy because we provided all those different price points of restaurants that enabled them to feel like, they could go to different places every day, and it was a good work experience too. So anyway.
Sidebar question. Is there anything you can do with the top of a parking garage that never gets used, or is it just going to sit that way forever?
Seems like pickleball courts would be a good thing.
Pickleball courts are about to take over every empty space in the world.
And they drive you nuts because that noise is so irritating. But as long as you don't put lights around them where people do it at night where it doesn't upset your sleep pattern. But no, pickleball it's a very popular sport.
All right. So they say, look, we like the space. We want to be here. We need 2 million feet. Is it now your job? Is the ball in your court to go hire an architect and start building a conceptual plan to bring back to him? And by that point, have you signed some type of letter of engagement or agreement?
Yeah. Like in this case, we had already hired the architect, but we want to make certain that
before meeting State Farm or after?
Yeah, no, before.
Okay.
But we wanted to make certain that they were happy with the architect as well. So we had a get acquainted meeting. We had a visioning session. And when we left, there were 4 architects there. There were probably 6 or 8 people from State Farm. We spent 2 days, went to dinner that night, and everybody felt really comfortable that everybody was a good listener. Everybody was respectful, polite, and there was no arrogance at all in the group. It was, let's do the best job for State Farm because they're going to take 100% of the space. So once we got through the design development where they gave us the thumbs up, that took probably 3 months. Every 2 weeks, we would have them here or we would go there. I like to be involved, but we had a finance person there. We had a design and construction person. We had a finance person that really focused more on the construction side of things as opposed to the overall project. But we all really wanted to make certain that the chemistry of the team was excellent. And it wasn't uncommon for me when I would get home, I would call and say, how do you think the last 2 days went? And if there's anything we need to work on, we can certainly work on it. And they would always say, we can't even believe how great this partnership is. So that's what we would strive for that on every project, and then make certain that throughout the project's length, which is usually 24 to 30 months of construction, that we over communicate with everybody. So I think one of our fortes is our monthly reporting and the transparency of everything. We fly drones. We have 2 drone pilots in the company that go out to projects once or twice a month and fly the project for not only progress, but also for safety reasons, to kind of chronicle where we were on a certain date because we don't want any disputes.
Yep.
If you really are careful and cautious and you do your work, you won't have any. And one of the other things we always say is this is our 34th year, and we've never under any way had any form of litigation on any project. So you say, well, what does that mean? Well, we're very thorough, and we make certain that we have enough details and our plans are complete. And we also make certain that we run a safe environment. And when you've got, on the State Farm project, we had 11 to 1,200 people every day working on that project. So, we lost time accidents are not good. And we always say when an employee of a construction company walks on our site, it's really important for us to create a safe environment where he can depart the site every day and go home to his family.
Yep.
And they work better when you reward them at safety luncheons, for safe work. They really realize that you're caring and compassionate. And we want to have that attitude by all the subcontractors when they walk on the site, that they feel better on our sites than any other site because we're safety fanatics. So.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna keep taking us back a little bit. So now we have the plans. From day one, has State Farm said, look, here's our budget? Or is a company that big kind of like, it's a range, let's see what we can get, and then we'll solidify it? Or is it usually like, we can spend $1 billion and not a penny more?
No, it was fluid. We were transparent.
Yeah.
We picked 3 contractors. We ended up going with Austin. At the time, their pre-construction and pre-construction pricing group was over the top. Since that time, there's 2 or 3 other groups that are really good too. But we would include them, and we would say, if you want a detached parking garage and the office building, it's X in cost. If you want a podium park with the building on top, it's a longer schedule by about 60 days. You have more density. You have more sort of people, all in a, little bit more confined area. But it's a different look. You get more height. And that as we went through those, they gravitated quickly to the more expensive podium park project. But then all of a sudden we had like 7 acres less. So our land cost was less. Mm-hmm. Okay. But the construction cost was a little more. Keep in mind, they were also a partner with us. So they felt better about it, as did we, that we were spending a little bit more. Every step of the way, we would share a detailed budget with every line item for the entire project with them. We finally agreed to what the final price was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was probably somewhere in the $350 to $400 a foot range.
Yeah.
And maybe 400. And that included 100% of everything. And then it was, what's the return on cost? And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a little different than today because interest rates were
Much lower.
still, much lower, probably more in the 2.5 to 3 range as opposed to 4 to 5 like they are today. We would build it. We would take all the risk. We would have all the completion guarantees. We would get the bank loan. We were the general partner, and they were essentially a limited partner and a profit participant. Thankfully, everything finished. We take the cost overrun risk of every project, but we try and offset that with a guaranteed maximum contract with our contractor.
Yep.
Knock on wood, we've, with the contingency that we've had, we very rarely, if ever, have, had a construction bust. And the contractor partners that we team up with, we know that if it's their mistake, they'll fix their mistake. So.
Yep. Most people maybe that listen to this have like built a house or something, but a change order, when you're doing a house, it's like, okay, it's still, the project stops. You got to have the architect redraw it. Maybe something's changing. It can cause a delay. It can cause a cost overrun, blah, blah, blah. Again, when I'm just picturing this massive 2 million square foot development, I am picturing there's like this day, a few months into the project where it's like, here's the plans. We all agree to them. We're moving forward off this set of plans. How often do you get something where it's like, you know what? We kind of need another building or like a massive change order?
I'd say that's very commonplace. You have to be flexible. But generally speaking, if you take a project like that, there's 4 buildings that are underway. We define them really carefully as to what the scope is.
Yep.
And what the shell condition is of those buildings. So what we have is an allowance that's outside of that cost, which is for tenant improvements. And that, that from all the work that you guys do. And that, let's just say for a second, it's $100 a foot.
Yep.
Okay. Well, $100 a foot times 2 million is, I think, $200 million. Okay. That is one where that's a separate bid package.
Yeah.
And that if they want to change the countertop specification, if they want to put a different kind of carpet in, or if they want to change their lighting to a more expensive or different kind of lighting, we will make certain that they are apprised of what those costs are, and that if they want to pay for them, then they're going to have to pay for them.
Yep.
Our motto is no surprises.
Yep.
If we don't communicate all those, then it's kind of our bad. And at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is sit down and say, we made a communication error and we didn't give you, a heads up on the fact that we made a change and it's going to cost you $1.5 million. So our take is, we over communicate and we're proud that we do. Yep. So that makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. Then construction happens, everything's built. And then when is your work done? How do you know that it's now done?
The tenant occupies the space. We get a certificate of occupancy, which enables them to occupy the space.
Yeah.
There's usually a date certain that we start the lease. And then generally from the certificate of occupancy, 12 months, in some cases, maybe a little less, some cases a little more. We have warranties We make certain that the contractor and the manufacturer behind the elevators or the air conditioning stand behind the project. Once the project has been occupied for a year and all the warranty issues and claims are, hopefully they're minimal, because we do really pride ourselves on doing great work. I'd say then we're just an owner of a building.
Yep.
Most of the time, the tenant prefers to either self-manage the building or they want a third-party manager. A lot of times the broker, be it JLL, Cushman Wakefield, CBRE, Stream, they have property management. We do not focus on property management, mainly because we just want to focus on the development aspect. So what ends up happening is they interview and they select, and State Farm selected Transwestern. They've done a really nice job. And that, when you look at the Toyota headquarters, you look at Liberty Mutual, you look at JP Morgan, they all pick whoever they have strong relationships with. And, then we're the owner. And then generally there's an option for the tenant to have a one-time ability to purchase the campus if they want. I would say most of the companies we deal with prefer to just lease for flexibility's sake and put their capital into their business. And we end up owning it until our obligations are pretty much fulfilled. And then we have the ability to sell it or refinance it or do whatever we do.
All right, let's just talk a little bit just about the market in general today. So, inflation's high, products are high, interest rates are high, but demand still remains strong here. Like, what would you say the state of like construction is in today's environment? I mean, you're building some of the biggest projects in DFW.
I would say our pipeline is full, but it's not as robust or as anxious as it was. I think there's consternation about a number of things. The consternation is, what are prices going to do for the next 18 to 24 months?
Yeah.
Okay, can I go in front of our board and tell him that this project's going to cost $300 million, and I come back and it's $360 million, and they terminate me? Okay, so prices, when will they really come under control? The other is interest rates. Interest rates, if they fluctuate like they have over the last 24 months, 30 months, it could be a 20% delta in what the lease rate is that, that company would achieve in the building. And then the other is, what's the return on cost? Well, if banks are skittish about making loans on commercial office and even industrial properties, how much equity does the developer need to put in the project to, obtain a construction loan? If before it was 20, 25%, now it's 40 to 45%, maybe even 50%, if there's any speculative space. So if you think about it, what return on equity does a prudent real estate investor, require, or would they receive? I would say minimally, maybe 10%, as a number. Well, if you have debt that's at 8 and you have equity that's at 10, and you blend them together on, say, 60-40, all of a sudden you need a 9% return to just service your debt and pay your equity.
Yep.
Okay, that's the way it was back, in the 2000s, when we would make a lease and the cap rate would be somewhere in the 8.5 to 9.5% range. Well, you heard, because you're in the industrial business, cap rates on exit were trading in the 4.5 to 5 range or 5.5 range. And that probably doesn't happen today. It's probably more like 6.5 or maybe even higher. But what it really means is, getting your arms around what the value is. If you're a construction lender at a bank, how can you tell your board that you've made a sound loan if interest rates change and you can't lease the space? Then what would you exit that building for, even if you have 40% equity in the project? I mean, so, there's a lot of hesitancy. The FDIC and the Federal Reserve, they have put a lot of pressure on all of the banks, regional and, money center big banks, too big to fail banks. And as a result, it's made it almost impossible to get a construction loan on anything that's got any speculative space, number one. If there is, it's almost like, why would you build it if there's so much uncertainty?
Right.
Why would you invest 40% equity in a project when there's probably a 50% likelihood that you might not even get your equity back?
Yeah.
So, it's probably a good time to hit the brakes, but everybody's got to stay afloat. So we focus a lot on corporate development work, corporate fee work. We just finished a really large project for Raytheon, and we're looking at a number of other projects that are pretty much everywhere. The data center world is picked up. We built 25 data centers for all kinds of operators and for ourselves. We just finished a spec data center with an equity partner. That world, because of all the frenzy of AI and, the amount of cloud computing space that's needed, it's good for us because we're really good at doing the project management, the construction management, and helping with the financing if needed.
On the capital market situation, I'd imagine if like JP Morgan came to you today, and I know you did one for JP Morgan, but they wanted to build another one, probably the most rock solid company in the country. Who knows? Maybe there's a better one. But then let's say a great Texas bank that's great, but they're just a regional. Would capital markets give a lot more credit to JP Morgan than the regional, or is it still in kind of such a flux that even a great Texas bank with solid credit and JP Morgan would kind of still be treated the same? Like, how would they look at each?
I would say a good example would be we developed the headquarters for Frost Bank.
Okay.
It's in San Antonio.
Down in San Antonio, yeah.
And they took roughly 65%. We've leased it to just almost 90, and that they're investment grade. But the fact that there was vacancy of, say, 35% when we signed the lease with them, it required a significant amount of equity. Today, it would require probably at least 50% equity with that speculative space. So the project probably wouldn't go.
Would a deal like that, would you get more proceeds off the loan the more you leased it up? So it's 50% down day one, but if you get it to 90, they'll advance you more money.
Yeah. And, it's, we call it good news. So the minute that you have good news, you can call them and you can, hopefully, have some loan proceeds that are sort of predetermined. And yes, that's common. But just getting the loan to underwrite, it's really difficult in today's market. Yeah. And that's why the FDIC is all over closing the loan window for commercial, office type projects. It's going to change. Yeah. I mean, you and I were talking over lunch. This current kind of down cycle is my sixth. And that if every 5 to 6 or 7 years you have a down cycle, if you're in the productive and development kind of mode in real estate, when the down cycle occurs, if you're in that area, you're probably going to have to shift into another place like asset management or doing something else because there's really not a lot of need. So we're keeping people busy, and a lot of it's fee development, but that's okay.
Yep.
We're happy with that.
Yep. Okay. And then on the sale of these things, is there a market right now for Class AA lease to credit tenant office buildings right now? Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a market, but I would also tell you that the cap rate sort of underwriting has risen because the price of debt has risen. So, if you thought you were going to exit at a 6% return, you're probably more like in the 7 to 7.25% to 7.5% return.
And just to get a take on inflation, let's say that City Line project, you said it was probably $300 to $350 a foot, or $400.
I think it was $400.
If you had to build it today, what would it cost?
$600.
So 50% cost increase.
50%.
Is that down from a high?
Years.
Yeah.
50% in 10 years. So if you do that, that's 5% per year.
Yeah.
And I would say during the pandemic, where do we see the largest inflation? It's probably employee costs, labor, and then subcontractor costs, just because of the amount of, inflation that they've seen in piping or concrete, steel. Concrete's still rising. So so have costs come down at all, or are they pretty? Overall, I'd say they've trended down maybe 3 to 5% over the last, maybe since the first of the year. And I think they're going to come down a little bit more. Just that's a gut feel. But I also think that a lot of that reduction is being offset somewhat by labor.
Yeah.
And, cost of living, that's gone up. So you have to pay people more, and everything's more expensive.
Can anybody do a max bid right now in this environment?
They probably wouldn't, or they would give you a price. It would be inflated to cover any potential cost overruns. And that they really want that contract signed before they actually commit to the price. So you have to really work it hard.
Yep.
And it means that the contractor needs to be super trustworthy. And we'll have 2 or 3 people that'll be working on every element of the construction. Plus, if it's a tenant, just take Wells Fargo, for example, they'll be in the room with us, making certain that everything that we do is what they want.
And from start to finish, if you had to pinpoint, what's the hardest part of the project? What does KDC do so well that most people can't get done because they can overcome X? Like, what is the hardest part of the whole thing?
I would say maybe the way to ask that question is, why are we good at, office, corporate, build-to-suit development? And if you compare us to a speculative developer, we, instead of having one person on the project, have 4 or 5. And we'll have interior people, workplace people, design coordination. We'll have a project manager that has a project administrator that every week sends out a report on schedule and pricing, and until we get to that final kind of, GMAX. I would say it's communication is just over the top important.
Okay.
And that you have to be very willing. It's very institutional from that perspective. Most spec guys that I know and love, they're all, one of the guys was on your podcast, Bill Cawley.
Yeah.
He's as good a spec guy as there is in the world. And if you think about Bill, I don't know how many employees he has, but it would be hard for him, unless he wanted to hire a lot of people and build a bigger staff. There's a real, you kind of design the building from the inside out. So when you have the interior person with the shell person on our team, they have to agree on base spacing, structural, heights, everything. And that usually when Bill builds a spec building, he's building it the way that he wants to build it for flexibility to make leases and to be successful. And a lot of times ours is more tenant driven, where the tenant's in the room helping drive that design.
Yep. One question just on brokers. How important are they to your business? I read a quote. You said something like they're almost part of the sales and marketing team.
Yeah, mainly because what we want is to gain their confidence and trust, and gain the confidence and trust of the company, the tenant, and gain that together where they know that we're aligned. And when I use the word alignment, there can't be one time in the process where the broker or the corporate tenant that we are going to make a lease with, they have to always say, they're going to share all the pricing with us. In other words, it's not like we're performing something where we could pad the price or do something inappropriate. If it hurts us, it's going to hurt them. If it hurts them, it's going to hurt us. And I just think that's a much more what I would call comforting way. We don't have terse words or combative discussions with our tenants and our relationships.
Yeah.
And we do that. If you have something that's an open issue and you don't resolve it, then it's your own fault for putting yourself in kind of harm's way.
Yeah.
And harm's way means that you're going to have a uncomfortable decision with the tenant or with the contractor. And we should be smart enough to avoid that.
Yeah.
And the only way you really can do it is by having enough team where you can make certain that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that you communicate in a fanatic fashion. So, to me, having a lot of people, if somebody said, golly, we have 7 people on that project. Well, we had 12 people on the Toyota project. We probably had 6 or 8 for JP Morgan. We had 8 or 10 on State Farm. Everybody has a really responsible and important role. And it's not just like construction management. I mean, it's the financial aspects. It's getting the draws in on time. It's, there's a lot of different things. Those are, $1 billion projects require a lot of, hand-holding and oversight. And, on State Farm, because it was so large, we had 2 full-time safety engineers that did nothing but oversee the safety engineer of Austin that oversaw the safety engineers of the subs, because it was really important to State Farm, because they're in the insurance business, that we have a safe workplace for all of our employees in there. So,
all right, my final question, and I know you take a lot of pride in working with the actual city governments that help facilitate these projects. So it's a general question, but if you had to say, maybe not advice, but if cities would do this, it would make life easier on them and developers, as a blanket statement. Is there something that comes to mind?
If you look at the first question you asked about the timing, the process, if you think that you need to get a zoning change and that the entitlements on the site need to be modified, you need to have an understanding before even the first meeting with the tenant, the prospective tenant, that, for example, I'll just use Irving for an example. When we get somebody on a confidential basis, we'll go to Chris Hillman, the city manager, and Rick Stoper, the mayor, and we'll say, we have a 1 million square foot tenant, and the project's probably $400 million. The site, needs to be clearly zoned. We need a confirmation that, things can go forward quickly with no delays, and that everybody wants to know, especially from the tenant's perspective, that there's no chance of a mess up and no surprises.
Yep.
Because wouldn't it be terrible if they signed a lease and then something came back? So they're very thorough. We're very thorough. But some people have the mechanism in place, like the city of Fort Worth is quite good. Okay. We've always had good success with them. Other places where you see a lot of corporate development, Plano, Irving, Richardson, McKinney, places that are high growth areas, they truly understand the needs of development. Okay. Some of the places that are older and they don't really have, maybe the right team in place. I mean, we haven't had an issue. So I'm not saying this personally, but it seems like the city of Dallas has some, people that are questioning the time on permitting and other things. And again, it's not us at all, but, you can't allow delays in getting a permit to make a top company in the country say, I'm not going to go there because there could be a 6 or 9 month delay. Everybody will run. So I would tell every jurisdiction, city, and municipality that if you can't streamline your, total permitting process and any sort of entitlement issues, you're probably going to have people that are going to not want to evaluate your site.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I get it.
Yeah. And, the state of California, it seems like, they're on one end and the state of Texas is on the other. And if you look at the in-migration of people from Chicago, New York, Goldman Sachs is an example. I think that Hunt Realty and Hillwood did a great job of making certain there weren't any permit issues. And, but they worked hard in advance to make all those things happen. So, entitlement risk is the first risk that you have to maybe check the box on.
Yep.
And that if we're interested in a site, our guys will go and make certain that there's not going to be a delay or a hiccup in getting anything done, because we have to represent to the tenant, what that would be.
Yep. Steve, thank you for joining me today.
Great. Good to be here.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Okay,
Thanks.
man. Thank you so much.